honor to have next to me Maria Clara Martin, who is the head of UNHCR in Greece, Dlawer Aldeen. He comes from Erbil. He represents MERI, an institute that has an expertise on that, and Myrogianni, who's a legal advisor on the foreign ministry. We have agreed that each of the panelists will go in a specific topic, raise some questions, and then we'll have a Q&A session to get a little bit in depth on the questions raised. So I call Dlawer Aldeen to talk to us on the issue of why do they come? Why do they live the places they are living in? Please, Mr. Aldeen.
Thank you, Tassos. And I want to thank the organizers. What a privilege to be here. We from the Middle East, where I come from, the heart of the Middle East, where we are surrounded by disturbances, instabilities, fragile states, failed states, we recognize two phenomena, or we characterize them by migrants being individuals leaving. Usually their obvious reasons are security issues, socioeconomic issues, fear of persecution. And this is the classical driver of migration that the international community always recognizes and defines in the laws and so on. But we also have another phenomenon which is more disturbing for us, and that is mass migration. Migration in groups, mass displacement of populations that eventually lead to onward migration. And we being your immediate neighborhood, the destination for most of those onward migrants would be Europe. So the reason for that mass migration is different from the individual one. They are usually related to instability, conflicts, extremism, terrorism, and different sorts of violence. But if you go back to the root causes of that too, you find that it's embedded in the poor governance, lack of rule of law, lack of social cohesion, and lack of state building and nation building. So really, it's lack of leadership, whether leadership at the national level or regional level or even global level. So we, in our neck of the wood, we found that the very reason why ISIS emerged was to do with exactly these drivers, multiple reasons. Within a few months of 2014, we suddenly had, where we traditionally had about 500,000 displaced people from the rest of Iraq, we suddenly had 3 million within the span of a few months. And those 3 million stayed on, even after ISIS was defeated. Currently, there's still 1.2 million left in Kurdistan region. They are not going back to Nineveh or Ramadi or other parts of Iraq where they came from. And this last 6-7 years, at least 600,000 of these displaced people decided to move on, migrate via Turkey, via Greece, and the rest to reach destinations in Europe. On top of these, we still have over 300,000 Syrian refugees, mostly, again, in Kurdistan region. So these are people who are still displaced, still not gone back. We and others have carried out a number of studies, field work. We asked people why, individuals, why are you not going back? Why are you moving on? What makes you attracted to Europe? And invariably, the reasons are the obvious ones, where they have lost faith in the governance in the region. They see lack of rule of law, lack of good governance, rampant corruption, but more importantly, this or let's say ethno-religious tensions increasing. There's more fragmentation, more militarization, more reasons to fear the future, and the conflicts that continue to brew. So where the very reasons and drivers that led people to displace, they're still there. So that means we have not tackled the root causes. So this is where brings me to my message here, and allow me to really address the European Union and the European member states, where they are our immediate neighborhood. They're impacted by anything that happens in our region. So they have suffered the floods or the waves of migrants, terrorism, extremism, as well as loss of trade. So the EU and the EU member states are to date not really tackling the right issue. They've always been there to help us. They were there when we were fighting ISIS. They were there to help us survive all these turmoils. Yet their approach towards eliminating or preventing migration is actually not tackling the root causes. We believe that the main policy changes that Europe need to contemplate is to have a more assertive foreign policy where they invest in partnership with the local decision makers in stabilizing the region, in institutionalizing, in state building, in making the governance work for everybody so that people do not decide to leave. And if you remember recent migration into Belarus and the crisis that generated, many of these people were Kurds from Kurdistan region. And invariably, they were affluent, upper middle class people. Why would they leave? Because of exactly those reasons that they are not finding any hope for the future for them to stay. So my final point here is, we in the region, we aspire to be stable, democratic, prosperous. We aspire to be good partners to Europeans, but left alone we cannot be. We are surrounded by threats, conflicts, drivers of instability. So Europeans, EU and European member countries need to look closely and make us the partners they deserve so that we tackle the root causes rather than invest in building walls and checkpoints and preventing migration while this area is your immediate neighborhood that needs stabilization. I'll leave it there.
Thank you very much, Dlawer, for your contribution and that. I will come back to that. And I would like to turn now to Mrs. Martin and ask her, while they are moving and arriving, crossing the last water before Europe, what can they hope of? Can they be integrated as soon as they get some status in the Greek society? Can they hope to be integrated?
Yeah, actually, just to give you an idea of numbers as well, I mean, 6 weeks ago, I would have told you that there were about 27 million refugees in the world. Today, I have to give you that there are 31 million. Because of Ukraine. That's Ukraine. Yeah. And, but still, the largest number of refugees in the world is Syrians. So it is a challenge, and it is an enormous challenge for the governments who have to welcome and work for the refugees. And I'm talking about refugees because when I say there are 31 million refugees in the world, let's not forget that these are the people who cannot stay in their country for reasons that my colleague mentioned, and they do not choose to leave. We have, in addition, 221 million people who are migrants who can choose to leave or not. So we're talking about people that haven't chosen to become a refugee, haven't chosen, they cannot be protected in their own country. So what can they expect? This is why this is what we call the refugee regime international protection, because it's what they, so this is the first time, sanctuary. What we've seen throughout the world is the Syrian conflict is 11 years old. The Yemen conflict is 7 years old. We look at South Sudan, we look at Congo, which has been waging wars for a lot of years as well. Even though I have yet to meet a refugee who says, I do not want to go back to my country, they won't be able to come back immediately. So what can states do, and what can refugees hope? We have two choices. We can decide to keep them in camps at a very high cost, keep them separate, and create a class of people who cannot produce, who are increasingly frustrated. Or we can choose to do something else, which is what Greece is trying to do at the moment, which is have an integration strategy, integrate them in the communities in a way that also benefits the economy of the country. And we have seen throughout the world, there are benefits for the communities that host refugees. Why? Because refugees bring new businesses. They can even employ people in the local, in their businesses. They consume more. There are more people to consume, so production, more clients, etc. For the economies, obviously, it's clear. These people pay taxes. They are legal. They are recognized refugees. They have the right to work. They pay taxes. They work. They consume. They create. For the companies, they are a plus. Why? Because you have hundreds of studies from Harvard University, Boston Consulting Group, OECD, that says that a more diverse company, a more diverse workforce fosters innovation, increases productivity as well. So it's a plus for the companies as well. And then for the society as a whole, because rather than having a group of people that are qualified, because in many cases they are qualified, much more. I mean, we have to get out of this idea of a refugee being a person who has no resources and nothing to give. 20% of the refugees who are in Greece have university degrees. So they can contribute in different ways. And even though those who do not have a skill, if the government knows where they need these people. So with the national integration strategy, we know which sectors to direct them to. So if you can choose to have that, and it also talks about what kind of society we want. Do we want a society with ghettos, or do we want a society with values and where people are accepted for what we are, and we allow them to contribute and fulfill their whole potential?
Thank you very much for that. Well, I was recently in southern Greece in a place where they cultivate strawberries. It's a very famous place. And the people were protesting to me, the owners, some of the worst employers that I have seen in my life, that they don't have personnel anymore because the Italians are paying 200 and 300% more, and all the people have left for Italy. It was just on the days when Mr. Mitarakis was in Bangladesh and in Pakistan trying to lure some new people to come to Greece. So, but very often these people go to Europe, and then when they are asked to go back to Greece because they entered from Greece, the courts decide that this is not a good place to be because some standards are not going to be kept. I mean, Mrs. Myrogianni, you may have been faced several times with that. How you try to fix it?
To be honest, we need to fix a lot of things about migration. Migration is an issue and a topic that it's very severe, and it's going to stay in our field forever. So it's important to see how we have, as the EU, have progressed in this issue. The common migration policy in the EU has started 20 years ago. It's not that far. I mean, we started with the Tampere programs in '99. The first minimum legal program that we had, it was in 2005. And then we started realizing the real need of having a common asylum and migration policy. And this is difficult because we are 27 countries, member states, with different problems and different needs, and it's difficult even now to realize and how we can be common in this and to create a common policy. In 2020, we had the proposal from the Commission of the new Pact on Asylum and Migration. And I would like to begin what you have said, to say that we can see that now the EU is focusing in the external dimension of migration. I mean, exactly what you said, that we need not only to focus how we're going to stop the people from coming, but how in our borders, but why they are coming and how we can create a situation so in the countries that it's not needed anymore to live. And I think this is the important thing that we can see also from the MFF, the multi-annual financial framework that we have adopted lately, the budget of the EU, that we need to focus in this. And what we need to understand, it's like Maria Clara said, is that we don't want to have ghettos, a society of ghettos. It's very important to have the integration. And this is important. This is why it's important also to see the decisions of the European Court of Human Rights and to understand how important it is that we need to safeguard all human rights. We're trying, Greece is trying, all the countries of first entry are trying. And now it's important because we also see the reaction of the EU in the Ukraine problem. It's the first time in 4th of March that we decided unanimously to have the enabling of the temporary protection. This was a huge, huge decision for the EU and I think globally, because we saw that in case of crisis, we're all there, we're all united, we are going to help. And it's very important to have this lesson and this example also to take it and to apply it also in the common asylum policy that we do in Europe. I mean, to understand that also in the new Pact on Asylum and Migration, we can have the same spectrum of solidarity and unity that we have shown in the Ukraine crisis.
Mm-hmm. I would like to go back to Dlawer Aldeen, and when this Belarus crisis was real hot, I spoke with some of your young people being back in Erbil, having tried the Polish border and having failed. And I got the impression that some of them were very often in Europe. They were very often in Europe. They were repeaters in Europe. They were 2, 3, 4 times. They got back for a funeral, or they got back for somebody who got married and then got to another country, etc., etc., etc. So, how real is the thing that you can, European countries can build up on conditionality to improve governance and economic reality in your place? Because we have seen conditionality in this country in the last 10 years improved some things, but not many. And I know that there is a conditionality in some agreements with Pakistan or Bangladesh about the globalization issues, about the terms of labor, etc. And this doesn't always work. Do you have any experience of conditionality being put and being applied?
I think a good way of describing that conditionality, I call it constructive engagement. Mm-hmm. Essentially, if you look at collectively the EU member states' contribution to humanitarian aid, stabilization, and so on, it actually outweighs any other in the world. But the European members are not talking to each other, and EU itself doesn't have a more assertive policy. What we need is that people to understand our dynamics, political and security dynamics. At the moment, looks very complex, and people think that conditionality may not work, but it does. Essentially, all the support, help, whether it's military, humanitarian, or economic, has to be conditional on state building, on good governance, on rule of law. The only people who can prevent migration are actually the rulers, the people who are actually in charge of decision-making and policy-making. It's them who would help you become your partner and help stabilize the region and then prevent onward migration. But our European colleagues or partners, they tend to be approaching this in piecemeal. When there is a war crisis, they help with the anti-ISIS war, for example, with the stabilization and with humanitarian help. And they do it individually very often, but they do not add this conditionality that the recipient or the home institutions need to be better structured, better governing, and have a long-term commitment to stabilization. Where they are feeling very sensitive, they think that conditionality would make them turn away, less responsive, and it has not worked in the past. I believe this is actually the notion of the bipolar stage of the old days, where many dictators were refusing any conditionality of any kind of help they get. Whereas these days, Iraq, for example, Kurdistan region, the dynamics is such, it's actually conducive to that. So where you offer help, in return, you should expect better institutionalization, monopoly of violence to the state. We should have less militarization, less polarization, more public services, and better control of corruption. When none of these are progressing, and yet you're still helping, it doesn't work. It will not lead to reassurance of the public. They are not getting the services. They are not getting the jobs. They are not getting any improvement of their lives. So my view of constructive engagement and better partnership is actually together stabilize, but also invest in the in improvement of individuals as well as mass populations' lives, create better harmony, better social cohesion, and tackle the root causes of the instability and migration. So it works, but you need to have a nuanced approach, understand the dynamics, understand. But by the way, I better make a very important statement here, and maybe that's my punchline here. The European member states are trusted for their motives. People do not treat them like we do with Iran, with Turkey, with America. These people have been driving instability, like our neighbors, the regional powers, have been engaged in rivalries, none of them interested in democratization or stabilization. And their game is still ongoing, and for a long time they will remain destabilizing the region. So their motive, their help, is always conditional on something that we fear. Whereas the Europeans have done enough, have a long track record for doing the right thing, investing in the right way, being the right partners, being there to help us. So when you add conditionality and you want better state building and nation building and better services and better institutions, people trust that because they know you have the right reason for asking it. Reduce migration, reduce terrorism, as well as increase trade relations. So this is where I would say that you're trusted and you're helping, and that leverage, don't lose it. Make the most of it.
One very basic right is the right to have a speedy procedure on getting an answer on your application or whether you're a refugee or not. And also to get a permission to live in a place. The records of that country in those two areas was poor some years ago. Has it become better?
It's become much better. I mean, you have to, it's, the government has made an enormous effort to build the asylum system. And in the past years, decisions are much faster. I mean, if you arrive today, you can get a decision in a matter of 6 weeks minimum, something like that. It depends on your case, of course. You have a right to appeal, and you have a right to appeal again, so that that's when you can see a prolonged situation, but because there is a right to appeal as well. Asylum seekers, while they are waiting for their decisions after 6 months of being in the country, can have the right to work. And refugees get a residence permit, and they get the right to work. And this is why it is so important that they are allowed to work and that they can work. And they need a little bit of help. Sometimes they don't speak Greek or they don't speak well enough. And this is one of the main demands. So we have to invest a little bit in helping them access the labor market in the same conditions as a Greek person. But even that investment, you can recover, and there are OECD studies, you can recover within 5 years and double it when people are productive. So this is what is going on.
We have less than 1 minute, and I give the floor to you. And I would like to ask you whether when you get a decision by a court, by a Western European court, either from Germany or from Holland or from Strasbourg, you have some effective way in persuading the administration that they have to change their ways in order not to get a decision like that next time?
So this is a topic that is difficult to handle. I mean, it's exactly what I was referring to before. Being 27 member states and having different approaches regarding migration, we need to have a unanimous way of thinking about how we'll handle migration, but it's not always easy. I mean, Greece is the first entry country. Germany, for example, is, has the, in their mind, they have the secondary flows. It's a different approach.
But you still need warm water in a camp.
I didn't.
You still need warm water in a camp. Even if you are first entry country or you are a country like Germany.
This is why we need to understand that the way that we have reacted now with the temporary protection is a way that we can do, and understand that we can have the same reaction to our asylum system internally, I mean, in the European Union. This is, for us, is a challenge, for the European Union is a challenge. I think that we need to do it, and we need to have now a common reaction to all this issue.
So we are off. We had 25 minutes sharp. The organizers told me. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you very much.